Philadelphia Phillies have officially picked up their first bad loss of the season, falling to 7-3 on the year by losing the season opener at the hands of the Atlanta Braves. Zack Wheeler did not have his best stuff on the mound, and despite Kyle Schwarber's best attempt at keeping this offensive alive, Edmundo Sosa's debut out in left field was spoiled in a game that the Phillies simply did not do enough to win. On to break down exactly what went wrong, as well as the deeper issue that is being revealed in this Phillies team in the early parts of the season. And yes, we're talking some bullpen. Gonna dive into all of that in this video, but before I fully get to it, do want to remind you guys, make sure you are hitting that subscribe button. That once again, 37.6% of you guys watching this videos, that's all that's subscribed to this point. So we're gonna get this Phillies Digest family jumping. Make sure you hit that button. It helps us out here. Now let's get into the story of today. So to start out with, ultimately was a 7-5 loss at the hands of the Atlanta Braves here. Disappointing, as you always want to take these games when Zack Wheeler is on the mound. I will say Wheels did not have his best stuff today. He did gut through it, and I will acknowledge forefront 3 of those runs we basically got to take off his there. That it was a routine fly ball out to left field, center field-ish, did drop right at the feet of Johan Rojas, and that was fully Johan Rojas' fault. Sosa did have his moments in left field. When looking, you saw a little bit of the newness to the position to him, but ultimately I thought he was just fine, and that is 100% Rojas' responsibility to take control of that outfield when you were playing in center and being the defensive-minded player that he certainly falls under the category of. And Rob Thomson has absolutely made that clear in the postgame. Important to note there, but that specific play did lead to a 3-run home run taking place later on in the inning, and that is how baseball seems to go. Now, beyond that, as far as the takeaways of today, did want to highlight Kyle Schwarber specifically. The man is on an absolutely heater, was on cycle watch today. He had a single, a triple, and a home run. Ultimately did walk on his 4th plate appearance there. This is a guy who the Phillies need to lock up. The time to extend Kyle Schwarber was yesterday. They got to get on the bike, got to come to an agreement. I do think he's going to be seeing some pretty lucrative money if he does hit the open market, so would like that to be done sooner rather than later. Now, as far as the game as a whole, a couple other notes before I shift over to the full bullpen. I would like to see Bryce Harper get going, man. We have not seen kind of it flip into gear on the season. I'm loving the way Castellanos is approaching the plate. I think this is probably the best stretch that we've seen from him. He certainly went on a heater in last playoffs, so I have to acknowledge that as well. But it feels like he's playing the purest form of baseball as it comes to him. And Edmundo Sosa did not, I guess the bat sort of went silent for the first time, struck out in 2 of his 3 plate appearances, was pinch hit for Brandon Marsh late in that game here. I'm kind of a believer in the mindset of, at this point, still do everything to get Sosa in the lineup. You ride that hot hand when you have one, and Sosa is a guy who has clearly had one. Now, where this game truly fell apart was when the bullpen came into work, and unfortunately, that is becoming all too familiar of a theme on this Phillies roster. Now, to talk about the bullpen as a whole, first I want to reflect on some of these guys and their stats here. It is still an incredibly small sample size, so we should not overreact to these numbers just yet. But looking at the bullpen as a whole, not exactly the results that you want to see just yet. Essentially, it feels like there are 3 trusted arms, and one of them, that being Orion Kerkering, did not perform today. Now, that is concerning on a couple levels, not just for Orion specifically, but more speaking about the bullpen as a whole. For starters, the bullpen was not good enough last year, and we knew that there were changes being made this offseason, that ultimately guys like Jeff Hoffman went to walk, Carlos Estevez left in free agency, that there were some new blood being brought in. One of those at the forefront of this has been Jordan Romano, and that has been an absolute disaster. To highlight what he has done to this point, and he did not pitch in tonight's game, that Jordan Romano thus far has a negative 0.5 WAR for this team, a 15.75 ERA across his 5 games pitched, just 4 innings, has allowed 7 earned runs across that stretch, 6 strikeouts there, and obviously his issues are being put on full display. Rob Thomson was asked directly about Romano, and mind you, this was a guy brought in with the intention of him being a high leverage reliever for this Phillies team, and that is simply not shaping up to be the case at this current moment. Now, Thomson was asked about Romano, and Romano himself kind of took it in the chin after his latest blow-up, and this article states, this is the pitcher that the Phillies signed to a 1-year, $8.5 million contract in December to pitch in the back end of the bullpen and be the closer in certain situations. There are much bigger concerns than Romano's inability to get out. Quote, just the velocity, Thomson said. It's something we got to check into. There's no red flags. The arm feels fine. I don't know if it's kind of a dead arm issue or what, but it concerns me a little bit. Romano's average fastball velocity for his career is 96.8 miles per hour. That fastball Sunday didn't go faster than 94.1. Quote, I feel physically fine, Romano said. I'm not sure. I'm trying to throw a good heater, and it wasn't there today. So I get that he's going to battle through this, but we also got to be aware. This is a guy who's had arm issues, and there is no guarantee that when you're heading down that path that you do bounce back. Now, granted, with the contract and with his track history, the Phillies were believing that this could be a guy that could be a value addition. It is not shaping up to be the case. Now, I'm not giving up on Jordan Romano in the full season scale. I do believe he absolutely should be relegated to some of the more lower leverage situations. I do think it is fair to give him a bit of a break for the meantime until he gets straightened out, kind of give him a couple games off. But the bigger issue when talking about those bullpens is somebody needs to step up and pitch. And when you kind of look down the depth chart, it gets a little concerning that this is a point that I was thrilled about this Phillies team for the way they constructed things last season. Now, granted, once again, we did see the playoffs, and some of these guys, these top arms, looked either spent or did not live up to the moment, and I do fear we're heading down that same path. When looking at the options for what they have to work with, Jordan Romano, just spoke plenty about, not a guy we can throw reliably in this mix. Matt Strahm is, but also did not pitch his best today. Now, granted, he was thrown in a tough spot. This was one when Wheeler was going deep in the game, clearly struggling, and Strahm had to pitch out of a jam. Did end up allowing one run, which goes on the books as Zack Wheeler's runner there, but he did get out of the jam there. So I have no fear about Strahm in the long haul. We know who he is as a pitcher at this point in the game. Would be surprised if that guy is not on an all-star team this season once again, just as was the case last year. Jose Alvarado, a bit of a guy that I still think we have to lump into the wild card category, although he has looked terrific this year. Now, the problem with that being is your top arms are now all lefties, that being with Strahm and Alvarado specifically there. Kerkering is going to be interesting, man. I was kind of discouraged by the version of him we saw today. It just felt like he did not have his stuff. I get it. That's going to happen over the span of the season. You're not going to be at your best every single night, but the location issues are kind of new for him. That hasn't been an issue that we've really seen with Kerkering, that, this is a guy that has been pretty artful in the way that he can paint a corner, use his stuff, and get hitters to buy in. That was not the guy that faced the Braves tonight, and that is something I'll have my eye on. Not panicking on Ryan. He's still incredibly young and really hasn't had very many of these downfalls here, but do want to keep that in mind. Joe Ross is a guy I'm willing to see if he can scale up. Let's throw him in a little higher leverage. And it's interesting, he was kind of initially looked at as sort of this, bridge middle reliever type guy that could pitch multiple innings, could play in a variety of roles. I've liked what I've seen from him. He's a big commanding presence on the mound, throws some heat, and I've been impressed with the version of Joe Ross to this point to kind of reflect on his full stats, and I don't think they're as great as I am making him sound here. But from Joe Ross so far, a 100% win percentage, a 2.25 ERA, a .1 WAR. He's pitched 4 innings, allowed just 1 earned run, had 3 strikeouts across that time. That is totally satisfactory, and even a little above that in my mind. Do want to see a little bit more Joe Ross, and that is a guy I'm throwing a little asterisk on as far as the overall bullpen outlook. But then you look beyond that, and that's where it really gets concerning. Jose Ruiz does seem like a guy that the Phillies are trusting, and I think he's been just fine this year, but he's not a guy I see scaling up or growing into a larger role or higher leverage role than the guy that we currently see. We did see Tanner Banks tonight, who did not look good. That is a guy that I honestly, these bottom 2 names in Tanner Banks and Carlos Hernandez aren't really guys I see fitting on a really competitive major league roster there. And that brings us to the problem with this Phillies. Cut and dry, I don't see a direction or a pathway around them not needing to add at least 1 arm at the deadline here. Now, we talked about pitching being a strength. The problem with that is a lot of starters, man. We've run through the list of how good Jesus Luzardo's looked. Aaron Nola will bounce back. I understand he has his skeptics out there. Zack Wheeler did not have his stuff today, but we know him as the horse that he has been the entirety of his career, and there's no doubt that he's going to be even better in the next time that he steps on the mound. And by the way, probably still should have done enough to get the victory tonight. It's not like he was outright bad out there. He just wasn't as dominant or, getting strikeouts at the rate that we've come to expect for a guy who will be in the Cy Young race this year. But then when you look beyond that, when you actually shift towards the bullpen conversation, things get a little bleaker. Now, if you are trying to make this work, you're going to have to shift arms around. I don't know if that is talking about Ranger Suarez into a bullpen role. I think it's probably really unlikely that Ranger's on board with that plan when you talk about the impending free agency and all those conversations, the money side of things that get into it. Taijuan Walker, I think, is very likely to be thrown into that role, but not a guy that I have a ton of optimism can, be effective for this Phillies team. And Andrew Painter is obviously a guy that they're going to want out of the starting rotation as well. So none of this is a solution to the bullpen problem that we are currently facing. We are still 10 games in the season. It is not time to fully panic yet, but my fear is if this is not addressed in a little bit more of the short term than the long term here, that you're going to burn these guys' arms out by the time we do get to October and do get to where it is playoff time, and you need these guys to be at their best. So at this current point, My biggest concern with this Phillies team absolutely falls in the bullpen there. Will be interesting to see what the vibe is within the clubhouse. If this is something that they downplay, they want to trust their guys. Relievers are the type of trade deadline acquisition that you can get at the deadline. There's no doubt about it that they tend to be shipped around pretty regularly at that stage of the season, and the Phillies better be in that market when the time does come there. So ultimately, not hitting the panic button. They're 7-3, not a bad start to the season. They just beat the Dodgers 2-1 in a series. Just an unfortunate loss to kick things off against the Atlanta Braves, but that's not a team that you want to get starting to build momentum. They obviously had a pretty catastrophic start to the season. I believe it was an 0-8 start that they were off to there, but now it's 2 in a row that they have won, and you do want to stop that, nip that in the bud, and keep them as low as the standings as ultimately is possible there. But regardless, we will see what happens with this Phillies team from here. 2 more games to strap up against this NL East rival, so we'll be on top of everything right here on Phillies Digest. But do want to hear if you guys are on the same page as me. Are you as concerned with the bullpen as I am? My level of concern has certainly ratcheted up over these past really 3 games, I would probably say there, but we're going to keep plugging through right here on Phillies Digest as always. So one more time before I sign off, do want to remind you guys, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. Once again, 62.4% of you guys watching these videos have not subscribed to us here at Phillies Digest just yet. We're going to keep it pumping out, keep on grinding through the season, and there are better days on the horizon outside of a loss to the Braves. Appreciate each and one of you guys tuning in this video here. We'll be back talking with you next time right here on Phillies Digest. Peace.